Well, as probably some of you know, my name is Gregory A. Brightbill. I work here at the University of Maryland. Today, we're going to be talking about how to navigate difficult situations as a leader. Now, this goes along with one of our other events that we recently had, which was Frameworks for Ethical Decision Making. Now, this is slightly different because this takes on more of a crisis response and crisis mitigation component to it. Now, here's the thing. I want every one of you to be, I know every one of you is a fantastic leader, and you are growing every day as a leader. And one day you are going to be an even greater leader, leading a huge division, area, realm, department, all of that stuff. And I know at the bottom of my heart that you're going to be an amazing leader. But I also know bad things are going to happen to you. You may do everything right, and everything will go wrong against you, because that's the truth. And I think the reason that we need to talk about how to navigate difficult situations as a leader is because often we talk about leadership as an opportunity for you just to do everything right, for everything to go perfect. But the truth is, and you can look anywhere and you see this being played out by leaders in the world, real leaders, in my opinion, are defined by how they respond to bad situations, by how they respond to the situations that were not their fault, how they respond to situations that put them in a difficult position. And I think that's something that I want you all to start thinking about. Now, today's workshop, I pull in several business strategies. These are management strategies. And in the world of leadership education, we make sure that there's a clear differential between leadership and management. And today we're going to be talking quite a bit about management. And most of these are things that are actually very widely known in the business world, but things that we don't often talk about in non-business sectors. And so I want you to start thinking about you as a leader. I want you to start thinking about situations that you've been in where you did everything right, but everything still went wrong, and how you handled that. And then I want you to start thinking about what you would do in some of these situations and how you could apply some of the things that you're learning today to future scenarios where you're going to be put, essentially between a rock and a hard place. So let's start. Now, I think it's important, first and foremost, to recognize, as a leader, you're going to be put in situations that are difficult. And so here's a scenario. So you work as a team, a team lead in a hospital managing an amazing group of people. You feel confident in your team and they respect you as their leader. Everything seems to be going well until you are informed that due to budget cuts, you will need to cut your team by 30% and reorganize the remaining team to fill in the remaining gaps. What is your first thought of this if you were in that position? How would you feel? Please feel free to use the chat, or if you want to chime in, feel free to unmute yourself. What would you think in this? You did everything right. You assembled a great team. Yeah, Mary, that's a great point. How will I do this? That's the first question. And then possibly looking at how is it done in the past? What is done before? What else are you all thinking? Yeah, Sam, that's a great point. You're going to argue that you can't do, how can they expect you, the powers that be, how can they expect you to be able to do what you need for your team to be able to do what they need to be successful when they're cutting 30% of your staff? That's a huge cut. So maybe having to advocate for your staff. Oh, also, that's a great point, Sarah. How do I choose who to cut? Because everybody on my team is excellent. I'm confident in everyone. There are no weak links on this team, but I have to still make that cut. So these are the things that we have to start thinking about. And I think this is a great scenario because it makes you start thinking about, wow, what can I do? What is there? I'm going to be angry. Now, here's the interesting thing. So some of you that are interested in like human psychology, who here remembers from your undergrad days I'm adjusting my screens because it was something I didn't like. Who remembers the stages of death and dying, or the stages of death and grief, also known as the Kubler-Ross model? Does anybody remember that? Does anybody remember that? Yeah. So interestingly, research in the realm of like business management finds that we actually handle these things very similarly. And the Kubler-Ross model actually has been applied pretty widely to not only death and dying, but to any type of stress, like of any type of loss. And cutting a 30% of your team is loss. It's significant. And then based on what you all shared with me, I see it exactly right played out with what you shared, that shock. How can they do this to me? And then how will I do this? And then denial. You can't do this work with less people. We're not going to be able to do our jobs. Frustration then comes in that afterwards, where you're frustrated at the organization. I'm angry at them. How can they make me have to cut 30% of my team? Who do I cut? I'm angry that I have to be put in that position. And then depression, which is usually where the team and yourself are probably very upset. The morale is probably low. You're probably a little depressed. But in these situations, the Kubler-Ross model is good because it not only explains the negative reactions to change, to loss, but to the positive. And so the Kubler-Ross model of change says that, okay, so let's just get it out there. The team is upset. And first we were shocked, then we were in denial that they can't do this to us. Then we were frustrated, angry at them, the organization making us do this. We did everything right, to depression of, I'm really upset. I don't like my job right now. I don't like the team. Morale is low. People aren't motivated. And this is where you as a leader, an organizational leader, have to come in. Because by knowing this model, you can almost watch your team. Because let's be honest, you as the leader have to be able to bring your team back up. You can't just say, it is what it is, we're going to be bad. No, we have to really move forward. And so once you realize, okay, my group's in depression, now let's do some experimentation, because that's natural in this. We're going to experiment to see how we can accomplish our goals. How can we accomplish our tasks? How can we still be effective? And so if you're in a healthcare setting like this, you're a team, you supervise a team of I think I said nursing personnel or medical staff. Okay, so let's look at how we're going to divide tasks. How can we innovate? How can we navigate this new situation? How can we adjust people's responsibilities? What can we get rid of? What do we need to keep? And so the team starts experimenting together. And here's the thing is, once that kind of happens, morale will actually slowly start increasing, because competence increases. People are able to kind of, okay, I feel this, I know what I'm doing. And then a little bit of decision making goes where, okay, let's decide what is working, what is not working. But as we're deciding, we're probably becoming more effective, more competent. And then finally, integration, which is where we've learned how to handle this situation. We were able to get through this negative situation, and we are now a strong team. And so as a leader, you're going to have to be the one leading this charge. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but bad things are going to happen to you as a leader. Cuts happen. And as a leader, it is your responsibility to help the group move on to be successful, to be able to meet your goals. As a leader, you have to know yourself, so that if you catch yourself sticking in depression, you have to realize, nope, now is the time to push everybody to experimentation, because we need to get to integration as a goal. And so this is a really useful tool for you as an organizational leader in handling it, but also predicting how your people, your staff, is going to react to negative situations. And part of that is also looking at how can we turn a negative situation into a positive situation. And so that is looking at like constructive versus destructive. And so if you're working with a team, you need to start looking at how can we make this a constructive situation? How can I be constructive for people and their improvement? So I'm looking for improvement opportunities. I'm providing clear direction. If you're a leader, for example, if you're creating a toxic environment, you're lacking vision, you're procrastinating, you have poor planning, that's not going to help your group be able to navigate this difficult situation. They're looking towards you for a vision. Also, as a leader, being constructive means allowing yourself to be vulnerable in the situation. Part of that Kubler-Ross model is realizing that everybody goes through these processes together as a team. And so for you to say, team, I'm really frustrated too. I'm really upset. But I see this as an opportunity for us to continue working and serving our people, our patients, and to maybe learn a little bit more about ourselves. And so there you go, a little bit of vulnerability, also giving and receiving feedback. That's really helpful for the team because you're all navigating and experiencing these difficult situations together. You're also figuring out what values are important to you. And so when those cuts hit, we need to figure out what is most important to us. And so does your organization have values that you can then look up? And then also holding yourself and others accountable is very important because when you're trying to navigate these situations, you have to make sure that, it goes back to some of those leadership styles that we talked about. Do you remember inspirational leadership? Inspirational leadership means holding yourself accountable so that you're upholding values and doing the right thing, and other people will follow, and then you're holding them as well. And then also being emotionally resilient and flexible, meaning you're willing to make sacrifices. So these are so important that you apply a constructive lens on these negative situations, because if you apply a destructive lens, it's not going to help your group be able to get out of it. And if you see members of the group applying a destructive lens onto the situation, you have to help them see the constructive, see the positive, because if you cannot get beyond destructive into the constructive, you're going to be stuck in that depression phase, and you're never going to get to the experimentation. You're never going to get to the decision making, and you're never going to get to that integration that is so essential in overcoming bad scenarios. So what are you going to do? So I've talked about how you get through with this. What are some things that you can prepare, some tools that you have available to aid you when you are preparing for these bad situations? Because here's the truth is, I've often said, I'd rather be proactive than reactive. It's better to prepare for a storm when the sun is out than to wait until the rain has arrived. Okay? And so with some of these difficult situations, there are some things you can do to prepare. First, most organizations have a mission statement. But does your team have a mission statement? Do you have a mission statement? Now, here's the thing. I compare mission statements, which is like, what do you do? What are your goals? What defines you? What are your values? Well, who do you serve? And who are your stakeholders? I'll jump to another screen really fast. And then you have a vision statement, which is often very important too. And that's like, it outlines like, what are your aspirational goals? What do you see yourselves in 10 years? Where does your team see themselves in time? What does success look like for you? What are your measurable goals and outcomes? Now, comparing a mission to a vision, a mission statement, think of it this way. I often say a mission statement is like describing the car that you're driving. I drive a white Toyota Prius compact, and I hate it, but I drive it. It has 53 miles to the gallon. It is tiny, has very little trunk space. It's like driving a golf cart. So I'm explaining the car that I drive. That is explaining, it is the mission statement. That is like a mission statement. You're explaining the car. Whereas a vision statement is explaining where the car is going. So if I'm on a trip to vacation at the beach and I'm going to Rehoboth or Ocean City, The mission statement is describing my car. The vision statement is, I will be at the beach, sitting in the sun, enjoying ice cream. I will not have had to pay a lot for gas. And by tomorrow, I will be sitting in the sun. So that is a vision statement. So a mission describes the car that you're in. A vision describes where the car is going to be. Where is it going? And this, I believe, is a little out of date because the University of Maryland, I think, adjusted their mission statement and their vision statement, because their vision statement was actually, I believe they shortened it. It was atrocious because it's way too long. And this is a good example. So a mission and a vision, they should be very succinct. If you get into more than a paragraph in your mission statement, it's too much. Your vision statement, again, more than a paragraph, it is too much. Now, what's the value of a mission and a vision for you? Now, first, if you're part of an organization and bad things happen to you, look at the organization's mission and vision and help you in defining how you will overcome it. So going back to those cuts, if you had to make personnel cuts, I'd look straight to the mission and say, okay, well, what does the mission statement say that we do? What does the vision statement say that we're going to be doing or where we're going? And I may have to use that for cuts. If I'm trying to navigate a difficult situation, a vision and a mission also allow me to fall back to hold people accountable. Now, mission and vision statements are both for large organizations, but also for small groups. And even actually, if as a leader, hopefully you've heard me say this to you before, if you all are going out there into the workforce and you're interviewing for jobs, you better darn well have a mission and a vision statement, a personal mission and a personal vision statement, because they're really, really helpful for you, because it tells people who you are. And if you're in charge of a team, it helps them understand who you are as a leader. And if you're with a team and you have a team mission and a vision, it helps you all understand what's important to you. So that way, when a bad situation arises, you can sit down and say, okay, what's important to us? What are we going to do? Now, the next thing that's really essential, who here has ever heard of a SWOT analysis? Anybody can remember back a SWOT? Sam, you're the only one that has your camera on, so I see you nodding. So I'm just going to. So SWOT analysis are something that is quite often used, especially in like organizations. Now, SWOT analysis, actually, there's quite actually some really interesting tweaks to it. But this is a simple SWOT. We're not going to talk about a very fancy one. Now, the great thing of a SWOT is a SWOT analysis is essential to you as an organizational leader to do anytime. So a SWOT analysis isn't something that you do when bad things happen. A SWOT analysis actually allows you to start seeing what are your strengths? What is your team strengths? What are your weaknesses? Okay. What are your opportunities? And what are your threats? Now, here's the thing that's important. The strengths and weaknesses are internal. So that's internal to you and your group. Opportunities and threats are external. So those are external coming in. So a strength, let's say, for example, a strength of the President's Student Leadership Institute is that we have a strong student, and we have a lot of students involved. I have 360 something students that sign up for the program. So that's a strength. I have a lot of students. A lot of students also means that another strength that I have is a lot of students know what this program is. A weakness. A Zoom world, my retention stinks. You know, it used to be I could get 60 to 70% of the students to finish the program. Now it's about 40% of the students that I can get to finish the program. So a weakness is my retention. Now, an opportunity is micro badging, micro credentials. Everybody wants a badge these days. You see them all over LinkedIn. An opportunity maybe is attaching digital badges. So here's an opportunity that I don't have that's external, pulling something in. A threat, though, could be um, somebody else doing that, somebody else badging before me, or a threat could be students not wanting to do leadership programs or anything of that. So those are external. So you have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, with your team, you have to sit down and do these, because then you're going to understand what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, because you should look at your strengths and say, okay, we know what we're good at, so we know what to capitalize upon right now. Weaknesses, we know what we're not good at, so we know what we have to work on. Opportunities, okay, how can we grow? Where is there room for improvement? Okay. And threats are what can prevent us from achieving our vision, or what can prevent us external in, what could harm us to being successful. So for example, if you work in the healthcare world right now, a threat is a new COVID variant. So that's like a threat. It's external coming in. Now, once you've done a good SWOT analysis with your team, and hopefully everybody, like if I go out, you'll remember SWOT's pretty easy. You remember strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You're starting to talk with your team. Okay, so we're learning about ourselves. Because then if you oversee a team, the next thing you need to start thinking about is called a risk assessment. Now, a risk assessment is something that's actually pretty widely used in business and organizations in general. It's usually used in crisis mitigation, crisis response. Crisis mitigation means, stopping, decreasing the harm of a crisis. And the great thing is about a risk assessment is there's actually several variants. This is a variant that I've kind of pulled together based on many different, because there's a lot of different models, but it breaks it down into 6 key components. So you first have the potential risk. So in this, you're listing, okay, team, I want us to sit down and we're going to pull out a dry erase board. Let's say we have it behind us. And I want us just any kind of what risks, what hazards do we have? And as a team, just throw everything, big, small, from, let's say, okay, one of you, who here is a dental student? Any dental students? Dental students? Emmanuel, can you unmute yourself? Let's play this. Let's do this.
What's up, Greg?
So, Emmanuel, what risks do you foresee in the dental offices that you're going to be in and working as a dentist? From everything that you do to around you to patient serving, what kind of risks, what kind of hazards do you see?
I mean, you're in pretty close proximity with patients. So like you said, any other outbreak like COVID, we're kind of very much affected.
Okay, so disease, infection. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. What other risks do you have? Big to small. What if you lose power? Is that a hazard? Is that a thing that could impact? Oh, losing power.
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
You need them to run the drills.
Okay, what else?
Um,
Cleaning supplies. We ran out of cleaning supplies. What are we gonna do?
So you can't move forward because everything has to be autoclaved and sterilized before, because you're putting things in patients' mouths.
Exactly. Okay. So big ones, small ones, think of everything. And as a group, and Emmanuel, don't go yet, because I'm going to do, if you're cool still staying on, I want to keep going with you. So big to small, everything. As a group, you just say any kind of hazard that's out there, because as you're doing it, you're writing it on a risk assessment list and just writing them straight down. The next thing you do is who is at risk. And then you're figuring out who is the person that it impacts most. So let's go to COVID. Let's do that. Patients transmitting. Who's at risk if a patient comes in and the hazard is somebody is currently sick and infected with the COVID virus? So who's at risk?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah. Well, and unless anybody else wants to chime in. Well, most likely everybody, right?
Yeah, everybody. I'm at risk. My staff is at risk. Everybody, honestly.
Everybody's at risk. The patients are all at risk. Okay. Now, what existing control measures do you have or would you have to prevent that hazard?
Appropriate PPE, proper social distancing in the office, just things of that nature, trying to minimize everybody's risk exposure.
Yeah, awesome. How high? Now, let's rate this risk because we need to know, is it a big risk or is it just a small? Like, for example, if I had to compare this one to potential hazard, ran out of toilet paper, which is a hazard. I mean, that's an issue. It's a small one. You don't think it is, but it technically is a hazard because then, yeah, you can't have a facility without a bathroom. But probably the risk rating, how would you rate COVID as a risk? High, medium, low?
Pretty high, because different people react differently. Like, one person can get COVID and only get the sniffles, while the other person can get COVID and have like severe adverse reactions to it. So I'd go with worst case scenario and rate it very high.
I would agree. What if you have an outbreak of your staff? You can't serve your patients. It's a big
Exactly.
risk. I mean, compare that to toilet paper, which probably is a low risk because, ran out of toilet paper, somebody goes to the store and fixes it. Hey, Mary, can you go real fast? I need you to do me a huge favor. I need you to go get us toilet paper. Pretty low.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, and then what is your desired outcome? So in this situation, what is your desired outcome? Most likely, probably people not getting sick,
Mm-hmm.
no infections. Okay. And then here's where you get responsibility. So then you assign responsibilities based on who would need to respond to this. And so maybe it would be responsibilities would be if let's say somebody comes in, I go to the dentist. I was there the other day, and the first thing they did was they checked my temperature. So responsibility number one is office personnel checks temperature. Okay, that's person. So it's been assigned to one person. If person has a temperature higher than blank, then we go to, let's say, Sarah. And Sarah's responsible for getting a COVID test for that person. Okay, that COVID test is positive. Then probably maybe either an office manager or a manager or somebody that's running the operations meets with the person, sends them home. And then maybe there's probably that person that emails the whole group saying, hey, there was one person tested positive, just a heads up, keep an eye on everything. Okay, so responsibilities, you're assigning responsibilities for people, how they would respond if there was this hazard. And you're going to do this for every hazard, big, little, huge, ginormous, tiny, itty bitty ones. Because what the value of a risk assessment is, what you're going to then do with it is, as your group sits down and you just fill this thing out with as much as you can, you're filling it out. When there's that issue, let's say, for example, the bad thing happens, which is somebody comes in and they're there for their appointment and they are sick as sick can be. And they have, and they have COVID. Automatically, if you prepared a risk assessment, you would have it there and available for your staff, and everybody knows about it. And so they would go straight to this document and they would say, okay, what do we do? Okay, well, what preventative measures do we have right now? Okay, this is a high risk. We need to make sure that way we're very careful with it because we don't want anybody to get sick. Okay, so what are the responsibilities that we need to do right now? And it's like bam, 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 bam. So this is a way that you can assess risks before they arrive, almost create as best as you can a plan to handle those risks. And by the way, Emmanuel, thank you so much for being my dentist on standby. So round of applause to you. But this is where this is valuable, because as a leader, you need to prepare this recognizing that most likely you're not going to be there all the time, but also that some of those risks and hazards may not be things that you should be the one handling, because there's risks, there's hundreds and hundreds of risks that, let's say, a dentist office has to deal with. But this at least allows you to prepare in advance so that there is a plan, there are people that are knowledgeable about their roles, and that you're able to handle crisis when it comes, and have it so that it's not a crisis. You're able to almost be proactive. Well, no, you are being proactive rather than reactive. And so the risk assessment is something that's super useful. Now, let's recognize that sometimes things happen that you never planned. You never planned. And so that's where what's called the PAR model comes in. Now, the PAR is more action-based. It's immediate. So we talked about, the SWOT, which is like pre-planning, figuring out like what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So we're planning far in advance. Based on what we know about our SWOT analysis, we were able to kind of develop a risk assessment to figure out, how we will handle various risks and hazards. But unfortunately, we also need to have an immediate model. And you as a leader need to have an immediate model for how do you handle crisis. And so we get to the PAR model, which is problem, action, results. Now, the PAR model can be used in conjunction with the risk assessment, but in many ways, the PAR model is something that's easy for you to remember. So let's go back to the before times, and let's keep using COVID as an example, because heck, that is all we talk about in the world today. Okay, when COVID hit, none of it, I had never planned. That was not on my risk assessment. How do I move an in-person leadership program with 250 at the time? I had 250 students enrolled. We've grown quite a bit since then. But what am I going to do? How do I handle a pandemic? And when it hit, I had a problem. But I knew the PAR method. Problem: what is the issue I'm trying to fix, and what is at stake? So just immediately you break down, okay, what is the problem here? If I boil this situation, what is the problem? And for me back then is, I have an in-person program with food, and I can't do that now because we're going online. Well, we didn't even know what we were doing then. We were shutting down. The problem is, how am I going to finish this? How are my students going to finish? So by boiling down the problem to its simple, essential component, I'm able to, it's easier for me to understand, to comprehend, because then the next step is action. What am I going to do? What specific actions can I make, and am I going to make? What am I going to do? Okay. And again, you're trying to look at that from a constructive view rather than a destructive view. What am I going to do? Well, I guess I'll make Zoom rooms. Well, back then we didn't use Zoom, we used WebEx, which was atrocious. Side tangent. I'll make all these virtual meetings. Because what is my results? What results do I want? Well, I want to be able to finish the year, have my students finish the year, have everybody happy. And so by breaking down into a PAR, looking at the situation, and I literally write out problem, action, results. Problem, and then I write out what the problem is. Okay, what do I want to do? What am I thinking of doing? Because what is my results? What do I need to have in the end? And through this, you're able to then address the problem in a more simplistic way. It makes a big problem a lot easier to handle. So these things together are what's really going to help you. We've got a scenario in a second. And I tried fitting these all onto the same page just because that way you can all see it. I'm also going to drop something into the chat. 1 second. From my computer. I'm going to give you this as a Word doc if you all want it. So you can apply this anywhere. You can apply this in your projects. You can apply this in your work life. There we go. Did you all get that in the chat? Hopefully you did. The SWOT analysis, and then taking the SWOT analysis and moving that to Oh, darn it, backwards. I thought I even fixed it. To the risk assessment to the PAR model. Okay, and actually you can swap the PAR to the risk assessment. They go kind of hand in hand. Now, let's play a scenario. Okay, and what I want you to do is we're going to break you off into small groups. And I want you to think of this situation. And what I want you to do is to use the risk assessment to address the issues. Now, you may want to use part of the SWOT. You may want to use part of the PAR. But in the end, I want you to start writing out a risk assessment. Here's the scenario. You are the captain of a spaceship traveling to Mars. Your team is fantastic, and you all have been training together for years in preparation for colonization. Using all three tools, identify some problems or issues you might encounter during your trip, and then also what you're going to do about it. So, start thinking of that. Now, you have in the chat the SWOT analysis, the PAR, and a risk assessment. And what I want you to do, I'm going to break you off into groups, and for about 10 minutes, I'm going to have you all go out and do this. SWOT, PAR, risk. Okay? Does everybody have the document? Good. So when I send you off into your little groups, I don't know if you'll have it. Does everybody remember? Feel free to take, this is a pretty easy prompt. So hopefully you don't have to think of it. You're going to Mars on a spaceship. You're the captain. There's the prompt. So I'm going to break you off into small groups. And I want you as a group to go through with these tools and start thinking about what your risks are and start using them to develop a risk assessment. Okay. Well, I want to be conscious of your time and thank you so much for being here today. Hopefully some of these were useful tools, especially as you think about being a leader, but also thinking about how you as a leader will handle crisis when it comes to you. Because in many cases, you have to really have a lot of forethought so that you're proactive in addressing problems rather than reactive. And that you understand what to do and you communicate with your team how to handle bad things when they happen. So thank you again. My name is Gregory Brightbill. Feel free to shoot me an email at gbrightbill@umaryland.edu if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer your questions. And with that being said, I will let you go for those of you that need to leave. And thank you again.